because what Kennedy had been trying to do with Khrushchev for the entire length of his presidency, Cold War notwithstanding, race to the moon against the bad commies notwithstanding, competition between the free world and the totalitarian world notwithstanding, he was determined to get Khrushchev to go to the moon together. And that, of course, is in total violation of all of the history that we have been told. Now, there are some evidences in the record, for instance, of this spread in Life magazine, showing technically how it might even be done. We have various memos. This one, a National Security Memorandum from November 12th, 1963, Memorandum number 271, where he specifically is asking James Webb, who was the head of NASA, to get ready for intimate cooperation with the Soviet Union, with the Russians, with the astronautics program of the Soviet Union, so ultimately they could wind up going to the moon together. Well, 12 days later, a brief window, John Kennedy is killed, and his colleague, his partner in architecting a global cooperation that would change competition into cooperation, into sharing of what humans discovered on the moon as part of a joint project representing all of humankind. He is sidelined to his dacha outside Moscow and spends the next year basically sitting in a rocker on the porch under house arrest by the KGB. So forces on both sides of the Iron Curtain moved, in our view, to eliminate the possibility that Khrushchev and Kennedy would do this grand thing together, and thereby perpetuated the Cold War another generation, another 20 years, which, as we now see, has morphed into, with the fall of the wall and the collapse of the Soviet Union, has morphed into a new war, which we're all caught up in, which is obsessing us and is focusing all our attention when there are real problems in the background, tick, 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 that we're not being allowed to even acknowledge, let alone pay attention to. In this close-up from the memo, this is the part that I really wanted to emphasize. It says right here, including cooperation in lunar landing programs, right there in black and white. This is not theory. This is not a wild idea. This is historical fact. It did not happen because certain people did not want it to happen. Now, if it had occurred, we now leap forward in time. This is a picture of Gene Cernan standing next to the American flag at Taurus Littoral on the moon. Classic picture, right? Rah, rah, Americans, American flag, American astronauts, NASA symbology, Earth hanging in the sky. Oh, there is one other little detail. If you look closely in this sky, you'll see this. And if you focus in on this, you'll see that it's a pair of incredible double prisms, which in an airless lunar sky in a vacuum is impossible. The reason is that as light is refracted through optically, transparent materials like glass, it forms differential refraction, red, green, blue, etc., etc. On the moon, we find that there is a stunning set of crud in the sky. It's not John Lear's atmosphere. It is the remains of an ancient set of geometric glass-like domes, and those domes are giving us exquisite rainbows, which when you look, you can see the effects along the horizon, just like sunrise and sunset have wonderful color effects. This glass set of structures on the moon gives you prismatic dispersion of color at sunrise and sunset, and when the astronaut walks and takes pictures, the horizon material moves because of parallax to shift with the astronaut's perspective. This is impossible under any normal reconstruction of what NASA said is really on the moon. This is what I think Kennedy wanted to share. He started out, in my belief, going along with the party line, that we had to go to the moon because we had to get information, and you're going to see what the information was supposed to lead to. And then at some point, he realized there was stuff there, amazing, astonishing structures, and that it was too big to contain within one country. that it would in fact precipitate the very nuclear war he was trying to prevent. And the only way he could possibly get this done in a way that would save everyone would be if he included the Soviet Union, the most powerful competitor, on the other side of the world. And then I found this, which I find kind of interesting in the context of what we are talking about. So, this man, how did he possibly know in 1963, as you're going to see that's an important date in a moment, how did he know there was stuff there? Well, because the CIA set up a satellite reconnaissance program in 1960 called Corona. It was a series of high-resolution film cameras in Earth orbit looking down on the Soviet Union, taking photographs of missile bases and all the stuff like that. Well, Corona went through several iterations. This is some of the technical background. This is photographs of the Pentagon taken with Corona. You can see what amazing things you can see. Well, what you don't realize, and no one realizes unless it's pointed out to them, is that you can also turn the camera and look up. You can use the same spy satellites to look at the moon. And in fact, we now have data showing that when you turn high-resolution Earth assets toward the moon and take a close-up look, you in fact not only begin to puncture the NASA connections to 2012, you also begin to realize that there is stuff on the moon that you can see from Earth orbit with the appropriate national assets, i.e. spy satellites. You don't even have to go to the moon. How do I know this? Because in the revised edition of Dark Mission, Mike Barra and I have published 3 sets of images taken of the moon by amateur astronomers now with amateur technology, CCDs and telescopes, small telescopes, 14 inches, something like that, which show astonishing artificial structures on the moon that you can see from Earth. And if they can be seen with amateurs in the 1990s and 2000 and in the 21st century, with the CIA spy satellite assets that Kennedy had at his disposal, it is not a stretch to imagine that in fact they saw this data on those images. Which brings us, of course, back to the whole 2012 problem. Because in 2012, as we said before, the Earth aligns very nicely so that if you're sitting here, you look across the sun, it's of course high noon, and on the other side of where the Earth would be in June, way out here, some 26,000 light years away, is the center of the galaxy. Now, that's kind of a code. That alignment, if you're trying to provide a symbolic code for what could happen, that alignment code is very important. Well, it turns out that this is the geometry in the galaxy. Here's the Milky Way, here's the sun, here's some of the stars in the sun's vicinity. This is the Orion Nebula, here's Betelgeuse, Rigel, the Crab Nebula, the star Sirius. They're all part of the Orion complex. Now, notice, here's the center of the galaxy. Here is the Orion complex, which is exactly 180 degrees away. This is a radial plot of the galaxy's hydrogen, taken from one of the recent surveys. And you can see here's the galactic center. Here are the various spiral arms of the Milky Way tabulated. This one is called the Orion arm for a good reason. Because when you look directly away from the galactic center out in intergalactic space, lo and behold, you are looking in the direction of Orion. Now, why is Orion important? Oh, why is Orion important? Orion not only is a physical constellation, an astonishingly beautiful physical constellation. Here are the 3 belt stars. Here's the so-called sword. Here's the Orion Nebula. This is Betelgeuse. This is Rigel, Bellatrix. Anyway, the point is that Orion, for some reason, as you'll see in Dark Mission, became associated intimately in the NASA mythology with the pyramids. And we now know that the pyramids from Robert Bauval's work are lined up at Giza almost exactly, I mean really exactly, mimicking the belt stars of the constellation of Orion. And on December 21, 2012, there is this wonderful alignment between the Giza shafts, those long, thin corridors that extend out from the King's Chamber right to the center, to the surface of the pyramid,